Today's show on Say That with Adrian. This guy is awesome. From Tulsa, Oklahoma, he was drafted by the Houston Oilers in the fifth round, played with the San Francisco 49ers along with Ronnie Lott, Joe Montana. I think they won a Super Bowl. We're going to find out a little later on. Came from Oklahoma University, the Sooner Boomers. Just announced that they're leaving the Big 12. He's an author. Has a book called Still Scoring the Red Zone. Welcome to the show. Fox Sports, my man, Spencer Tillman.
Adrian, thanks for having me, brother. How are you?
I'm good, my man. I'm good. Let's start back, my man. You got a draft in the fifth round, coming out of Oklahoma, running that wristbone.
Yeah.
What was your mindset drafting that late in the fifth round by the Oilers? Where it's like, I'm going to make it or I'm not going to make it?
Well, you remember back then, the draft, we had more than 7 rounds. You know, we were deep. We had 12. So that was kind of like a middling kind of range. I was projected late in the first, early second round. Didn't happen that way. You know, that's kind of the way the NFL goes. You know, there's an old axiom, the NFL actually stands for not for long. So even if you do make it, you know, it's hard pressed that you're there for any long period of time. But, you know, listen, I was concerned a little bit, but the fact that I was able to compete at Oklahoma with the likes of, you know, Marcus Dupree, just great runners, great running backs. We had a ton of them, man, all over the place. Lydell Carr and others. And we considered our quarterbacks running backs, too, at Oklahoma. So you had Jamel Holloway, and people forget this, but even before Jamel took over for Troy Aikman. People forget the fact that Troy Aikman was at Oklahoma, and then he broke his tibia against Miami early in that first quarter, I think it was. And then Jamel, a true freshman, came in and replaced him and never looked back. But back to your point of how I felt, you know, again, it was a different era. We had more rounds than we do now. And the likelihood of you making it, even though it was slim to begin with, it was certainly a lot more than it was now, to be sure.
Really? Your days in Houston was very successful, except for one game I came to. No. Here's the thing. The last game of the season y'all played was against Buffalo before the collapse. Y'all kicked the heck out of Buffalo that last game of the season in the Astrodome. Went to Buffalo that following Saturday and just collapsed in the second half.
Yeah. You know, they say you should never play opponent twice in the same year. And a lot of times what happens is opponents, you know, you adjust really quickly. The NFL is a league of adjustments. Remember now, going all the way back to when the late Pete Rozelle, the former commissioner, created this whole concept, he coined the phrase any given Sunday, right? And any given Sunday, inherent in that term was the idea that anybody could beat any other team on any given week. The talent was balanced. If you finished last one year, you were going to get the first pick the next year. And all that was designed to create this kind of balance, this equilibrium in the league. So it had a built-in affirmative action, if you will, in the whole process. So to play someone in successive weeks meant you were at a disadvantage in that second meeting because whatever it is that you did right, they had a chance to adjust to it and have an answer for it. And obviously, if you didn't have any mistakes or limited, no need to change anything because they didn't stop you. And you don't know what to plan against. You don't chase ghosts in this league. It's kind of a common saying, but it's absolutely true. So, there's a lot to that.
Yeah, I remember that game very well. I was with Thurman's family. Thurman's family at that game. They said, at the end of the game, how many of y'all going back to Buffalo for all this game? Half the people didn't raise their hand. Thurman's parents was going. And I was like, all this going to beat them. But being at that game, man, it was a wonderful thing to see y'all win. Being in Houston, you played 2 seasons there. Just found out something that you have the taxi cab driver.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was crazy. You know, you imagine, I think we were playing Atlanta Falcons that week. And we had we had a routine of staying at the hotel, the Marriott downtown Houston, the night before the game. The teams did. And so that I didn't have to take my car back, my wife, who was working with United Airlines at the time, she would, pick me up and then drop me off. But she had a trip. And long story short, I took a cab from the hotel to the Dome. And in the process of getting to the Dome, the cab driver had a heart attack, went into cardiac arrest. And we're on 288. And we're going about maybe 60 miles an hour, 65 miles an hour. And the only thing that really saved me, I think about it, was the fact that it was a Sunday morning, because there's really no one on the streets. I mean, but for the fact that it was Sunday morning, there probably would have been cars all around us. But I was able to jump from the back seat into the front seat to arrest the steering wheel from the guy. And we got over to the side and finally got him out of the car. And I worked at a nursing home when I was a kid in Oklahoma. And I had CPR, part of the qualifications for working there. You had to, know how to administer CPR. So we did that on the side of the road there. And it was really weird, man, Adrian. I took note, certainly, Stop Racism as one of your monikers behind you. At the time, and this would have been, I want to say 87, 88, somewhere around there. All the thoughts that were going through my mind of here, this black man on the side of the road over the top of this white cab driver administering CPR, and the thought, of all things, not saving his life, not anything about that, but just the idea of what would happen if somebody stopped, and just misconstrued what was going on. What if a police officer stopped and misconstrued what was going on? And that could have easily have happened, but it didn't. Was able to get the guy resuscitated. Emergency vehicles got there, and I learned a lot that day. The last nugget that I learned, besides CPR does work, was the lady that stopped on the side of the road to assist us. She offered me a ride to the Dome. I told her, I said, well, I certainly appreciate that. So in the brief time that we had from that point, I just kind of struck up a conversation with her, and she told me she was a woman of faith. And I said, well, my mom was a missionary. We had a talk. And I asked her, she said, what faith are you? She said, well, I'm Episcopalian. I said, well, tell me a little bit about Episcopalians. I don't know much about them. She said, we're basically Catholics who can divorce. And I just remember saying that. And that's always kind of my punchline to my friends who are, I've got a few Episcopalian friends and some Methodist friends that are out there. And so anytime I get a chance to drop that line, that's always fun. But that was the least of the exciting things that day. Being able to save somebody's life was really cool.
Wow. Just before a game gets announced now.
Yep. Yeah, like I said, I knew the NFL stood for not for long, but I didn't take that literally.
Was your main goal also to win a Super Bowl?
It was really, the main goal was just to be a part of something special. That's the one thing that Coach Barry Switzer taught us at Oklahoma. You don't really get caught up, and I know this sounds so trite because everybody wants to achieve great things and greatness for themselves and the people around them that they care for. But one of the things I learned really quickly at Oklahoma after having great success early there, on the all-time freshman rushing record for nearly 30 years. And it's just one of those things where you find out in the aggregate that it's really about what you do with the other people that is special. It's not about what you do yourself. And it's really about the team. It's what Lombardi talked about. It's the team. And, few people reach their full potential with only themselves to emulate. I got a call this morning just to make the point from my high school coach, Tommy Thompson, who swore to me that when and if I graduated from Oklahoma University, he would be there in Norman, Oklahoma with the cowbell to ring it. And sure enough, when they called my name across the stage, I heard this clink, 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 clink. And I looked up, and it was Tommy Thompson there. He and his wife, Connie, had traveled all the way to watch me graduate. But it just goes back to point out how people who are part of your journey are integral. And even though 4 years elapsed between the time that he said that and made that promise to me and me graduate from Oklahoma, it stood the test of time. And to this day, we chat with each other. In fact, he just sent me a nugget this morning to basically, have I ever told you that I loved you? He does that all the time. Barry Switzer does that all the time. He just calls me up out of the blue sometimes. And I'll call him up. So what are you doing, big boy? And he says, anybody tell her I love you? And I said, yeah, you did. And I hope it never gets old, It'll never get old, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, I did have as a goal to do well, but it wasn't really about, winning Super Bowls necessarily, although I didn't hesitate when I had an opportunity to go to San Francisco. I left Houston really quickly because that was That was the objective. 2 years, and then I bolted. And part of it, I remember the day, Adrian, I was sitting in my office at KPRC Channel 2 because I was working in the offseason as a broadcaster for the NBC affiliate in Houston. And then when this whole Plan B free agency thing came up, I basically asked them to kind of let me go, basically, because we had we were running a one-back set, and we were running run and shoot, and we had so many running backs. I mean, we had myself, Lorenzo White, Alonzo Highsmith, Mike Rozier, Heisman Trophy winner. We had like 5, 6 deep, and only one was going to be in the game. We're not running a two-back set. It was a one-back set. So I did well on special teams and third down, came in and did some things cool there. But I wanted to play more, and free agency gave me a chance to do that. And so when the opportunity came up, I bolted, went to San Francisco, immediately became a team captain and was elected by the team and the coaches and won a couple of Super Bowls. And it was just great period. Great period.
Being in the two locker rooms.
Yeah.
What was the chemistry difference going from all this to San Francisco, where you won a championship? Didn't that just uplift you, or
more
to say, hey, we in it to win?
No question. That's a really good question too, because the first thing, went to San Francisco, was there for about 4 years, and came back to Houston. And the first thing people ask me is, what is it like to win Super Bowls? What is it like to be a part of a championship organization? And here's what I would tell them. It's amazing how your valuation, your worth goes up when you go do something special, then you come back, and in their eyes, you're more valuable than you were when you left. And the truth of the matter is, I'm older than I was when I came back. I may have been in my prime, though, I will say that, because I left Houston when I was really young, and I came back in my prime. So it was a perfect scenario for me. But your question is a very, very intriguing one, and it's a very important one, because materially, those Oilers teams that we played on had more talent overall in the aggregate than those 49er teams. And people say, no, you're crazy. I said, no. Now, saving maybe one position simply because he's the GOAT. And I know that Tom Brady is the GOAT in a lot of people's mind. But for me, Joe Montana always will be the GOAT for me, right? It's a different era, different game. It wasn't as pass happy as it is now. And there was this interconnectedness that had to be a part of the game. You couldn't hide weaknesses during that time period. If you're going five or four wide receivers, you just get rid of the ball quick. You can protect. A quarterback can be 42, 43 years of age and stay in the league as long as he's smart and getting rid of the ball. But when you're running two-back sets, you don't have as many people protecting around the line of scrimmage. You got to have a nimble quarterback, but you have to have an accurate quarterback when you go to the throw game. There's just so much more that's required of you. It's a different era. So I don't think to judge them, Brady and Montana, against one another is really a fair assessment. I think he was a surgeon in shoulder pads, Joe Montana. And so I personally believe he's the best, the greatest of all time. In a pressure situation, I wouldn't want to be in the huddle with anybody else but him. So, that whole situation was great, but the talent level at Houston in the aggregate, saving the position of quarterback, and that's no knock to Warren Moon. Warren is a Hall of Fame quarterback, great quarterback. I think in a private room without consequences, people would give the edge to Joe Montana. But nobody threw a better ball than Warren Moon. I mean, the best ball, period. I mean, you could literally hear off the fingernails when it would come off his fingernails. Nobody threw a better ball, a prettier ball than Warren Moon, period. Nobody. I don't care in the history of the game ever. And that's not a debate. But in the aggregate, in the overall, those Oilers teams had more talent than the 49er teams in the aggregate. If you were to take those 22 positions and say, hey, you may have a nod here at the quarterback position. You may have a nod. Jerry Rice was great, no question. But in the aggregate, those four wide receivers at the time, Drew Hill, Haywood Jeffries, Curtis Duncan, Webster Slaughter later on, I take those four as a group over any two or any three that had one. And that's not a knock on John Taylor. John Taylor was a great, very prolific receiver, but he was playing, obviously, opposite of Jerry Rice. And so, by the way, I don't know if you can see it now, but I got a pair of Jerry Rice's shoes. Actually, it's on this other side over here. Got a pair of his shoes up there. Yes.
I had a chance to during the offseason, some of the receivers on good basketball fans.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Montana and Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting there talking to him, saying, man, how was Joe Montana? He said, sitting there. Joe just got in the huddle and said, "Hey, we just need to move the ball down. Let's get it down. Let's go."
Yep. That was really his elixir, if you will. That was his magic potion. It was the ability to chuckle, as one of our teammates, Harris Barton, famously quipped. We're marching against Cincinnati, and then he looks and sees John Candy, the late John Candy, the comedian, on the sideline there in Miami, and he looks at him. He says, "Hey guys, there's John Candy." This is on the final drive now. I mean, there's like 3 minutes left in the game, and we're down, And then John Taylor eventually, 11, 12 plays later, scores the winning touchdown. But that drive started off with Joe Montana in a television break, looking at John Candy on the sideline and joking. And so Harris said, "Hey man, come on. This is a game. We're serious. We're down. We're going to lose, And he says, "It's cool, man. It's cool." And he kind of laughed and then immediately shut it down. And then said, "All right, 2-jet flanker drive, Z deep over." And boom. And then I mean, I just went down the field and just did surgery, man. It's unbelievable. But just a few plays earlier, he was joking about John Candy being on the sideline. But that was just Joe. He was a surgeon in shoulder pads.
You had touched on about winning the Super Bowl. I've been around a lot of guys, just talking about championship.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to Moses Malone.
Yeah.
I said, years was in Philadelphia, won a championship. No. It was in Houston. Houston. I was like, what? Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he explained it. Similar to what you just said about winning the championship, and that the team that he was on was better than what he had.
Yeah.
And he could, I was dominant that year. I was jumping out the gym when I was with the Rockets.
Yeah.
We just had some players that worked around us, just made things happen.
Yeah, I mean, when you have complementary players or two bigs, as it were, if you have Akeem Olajuwon and Moses Malone that's playing together, that's a matchup problem for most teams. You know what I mean? So you got to make some choices. And big men are rare. Big men that can move, that can play, are rare. And so you have to make some choices about that, and that can be a problem. And there was just so many other tenets of the game. I remember talking to Rudy Tomjanovich once, and he was talking about, and I use this in football all the time. He talks about how spacing was so critical and so important. And he would challenge his guys, particularly the ball handlers, not to cover themselves, meaning if you're playing so close together and you're in the front court, and let's say, for example, we're playing a team that's playing man-to-man. Well, if I want to put stress on that defense, what I need to do is put space between my two people, because when I do pass the ball travels faster than the body, right? The ball will get there faster. So if I'm playing man-to-man, and let's say I'm going to do a switch, if I'm a defender, I got to run the distance that ball has traveled to cover somebody else. Right. If I'm standing right next to him, if I just pass the ball to him, all you have to do is step up right next to her, right? And 2 steps and you're covering. You're making the defense easy. So spacing is absolutely critical, because you're going to make people work. And when you have spacing, when you pass the ball, that person's got to run. So the concept of the ball moves faster than the body, it's a very simple construct, but you would think that players could understand that easy. But when you look at tape, a lot of times you say, "Hey man, why are you covering yourself? You're sitting there right next to the guy and you want to pass it. Don't pass it. If you're going to sit there, go shoot it. Why even bother to pass it if you're not even allowing the guy to work hard to defend? Make him run. Spread yourself out. Then pass the ball and make somebody work to go defend, because they'll never ever be able to get there as fast as it took you to throw the ball. So and here's the thing about it: the greater the space, the more difficult it is to defend. That's why the 4 corners defense was such a powerful defense, and why the rules of the game changed. Because as the game is winding down, if you can get in 4 corners and make people work, and there was no time limit on the clock, shoot, you could ice a game away. That's why you'd have those 62 to 59 games and stuff like that. So anyway, yeah.
In our life right now, some people go through some difficult times.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking to you about speaking to you, asking you questions about how did you overcome things? How did you get to point A to point B?
Mm-hmm.
You won a championship with Oklahoma Sooners. You came back and won a championship with San Francisco 49ers. You wrote a book. sports. During those times, what adjustments made you stick with it? What made you get through the tough times to be successful to what you have accomplished?
Yeah. Good question. Success is really a series of choices. There are seasons that you go through when things may not necessarily look like you're having success, but if you're playing an infinite game, everything that happens to you is part of your success equation. Even what is construed as negative things, losses, they're as much a part of your success narrative as the successes are. Because if you're paying attention in the losses, that's when you're going to learn the most. Quickly, there are three contexts in which we learn the most. Number one, when we experience sudden loss, it can be the death of a loved one. And here's a little bit of a twist on the narrative there. Sudden loss can be a situation where you have a birth of a child. And what do you say? Well, what do you lose? Well, you lose the independence and the ability to be free from that responsibility. So now you got to grow up. So that's one example of sudden loss, but they're kind of antithetical. They're kind of opposites. When you lose someone to death, you've literally physically lost someone, right? Their spirit may live on, and whatever your belief system allows you to believe about that piece, that is what it is. But they're physically gone. If you have a birth of a child, what dies is your ability to do whatever you want to do. If you were single before now, or not, let's say you didn't have any children before, and all of a sudden now, because of the child, you just can't get up and go anywhere you want to go without any responsibility. You have to do some things, right? So the first context where we learn the most is when we have sudden loss. Number two, when we are thrust into foreign territory. Let's say, for example, you get traded to a team that you don't necessarily want to go and it wasn't your decision. Or you get fired from a job, or you go to a new job and you have to learn a different protocol, a different way of doing things, learn a new system. I think about, for those, I know this is a global audience, but in Houston some years ago when Continental and United merged, I used to talk to them all the time because I'd be in the airport every week. And the people in Houston who were with the Continental Group, they would be really frustrated about the change because obviously the dominant culture then, as they perceived it, accurately so, was United. And that was the culture that was taken over. So their protocols and their ways of doing things up in the north in Chicago, where United is based, became the norm. And the folks down south resented it. And that, if you're running a company, can be a challenge, right? And so, not to get sidetracked, that's really the second phase when you're thrust into foreign territory. And then lastly, if you have mentoring relationships, for me, the likes of Bill Walsh, Barry Switzer, other great people, the Reverend Dr. Greg Headington, and other friends of mine who mentored me over time. And some of them are young enough to be colleagues, but their experience complemented what I was experiencing, and we were able to leverage that to make both of our lives better, as the case may be. So I was able to endure because I had bibliography and footnotes. Every experience was a contributor to success. So if you ought to be on tiptoes of anticipation no matter what happens to you. You should be excited, whether the bottom just fell out or you just won the lotto. I get more concerned when I have great success than I do anything else. As a matter of fact, I try to work against that success because few people run well with a full cup of success. The tendency is for human nature to take over and you relax more when you've had great success. The great coaches out there understand human nature, and they actually try to induce a sense of fear or a sense of an average sense of what that success means. It's not, it doesn't neutralize us. It doesn't make us become lazy. And the only way to fight that is to get back on the horse really quickly and let that celebration period be very, very short, because your human nature will allow you to rest on your laurels and read your paper clippings, as I used to say back in the day when there were newspapers, a little bit longer than you should. So I was able to endure because I had good mentors that taught me how to learn. And my dad used to say, for example, every decision contributes to your character. And so character is nothing but the collective choices that we make. If you make enough good choices, you become known as a person of good character. And alternately, if you make too many or poorly timed decisions, you can't be regarded as a person of character. And so that's another component of it as well. So that's how I was able to endure.
How can someone get back on their horse? You talk about jumping back on their horse and heading forward.
Yeah.
If they don't know how to jump back on their horse,
yeah,
and make the right decisions.
Well, it just depends. It depends on where you are. When you talk about getting back on the horse, what are you getting back on from? I mean, and I think that matters a lot. Have you been on the mountaintop and then got knocked down? That recovery is different than someone that has had a steady, slow, average existence, and all of a sudden the bottom falls out. They've been looking for some hits, some positive experiences along the way, because we're oriented as seekers of success. That's why we establish goals. We need to hit interim goals. So if you put this mountaintop objective up here and you don't have any interim spots in between that you make that will allow you to have positive feedback, boy, that's going to be a long uphill climb. There are some people who can remain focused in situations like that, but I guarantee you they've got some kind of infrastructure in place, i.e. the mentors that we talked about, that give them bibliography and footnotes to let them know in advance what the inherent nature of that process is going to be like. And so if I have knowledge of what that climb is going to be like, when there's that drought, I know, for example, this is what it was going to be like. We go to training camp for 30 days in football. You know it's going to be 2-a-days back in the old days. You knew it was going to be hard. You knew it was going to be sweltering heat. You knew all of that. So no use sitting there waiting for day 4 to pass by quickly and hoping for some reprieve, because you knew you had 20 some odd days left. You know what it's going to be like, and you knew it in advance. So those experiences really serve two purposes. Number one, they develop your resiliency. And number two, it allows a coach to discern, and it allows you to be exposed to what your capacity is. Can I trust you in these situations here? By observing you operate in sweltering heat, Dr. King would say, our forefathers and foresisters often had nothing to look forward to but the sweltering heat, the long rows of cotton, the rawhide whip of the overseer sweating down your back. But what did they do, Adrian? They took Jeremiah's question, is there no balm in Gilead, and straightened it into an exclamation point and decided to declare, there is a balm in Gilead that heals the sin-sick soul. There is a balm in Gilead that makes the wounded whole. So they took a question that the prophet Jeremiah's people were struggling with in their day. And our forefathers and foresisters generations later saw a similar plight that he saw. Jeremiah looked and saw the wicked people prospering and the good people suffering. And he says, is there no balm in Gilead that heals the sin-sick soul? This is not right. And then our forefathers took that same narrative by people who meant them harm, and then turned those tables on them and took the rawhide whip of the overseer, the sweltering heat, long rows of cotton, and that dismal context, and straightened it into an exclamation point, and took that question and turned it into a declarative sentence and said, there is a balm in Gilead that heals the sin-sick soul. There is a balm in Gilead that makes the wounded whole. So that's how they turned it around. And that's how we turn it around to this day. We have to affirm what is just, what is right, what is pure, and play the long game. And if we understand we're playing a long game and not a finite game, we're going to be in good shape.
Okay.
Yep.
He's an artist. He's an artist. Still scoring in the red zone. What encouraged you to write that book in that aspect?
It was the death of my mom, and really in keeping with the theme of mentors and what impact they have on your life. She was a missionary, did work all over the place and all over the world, and she taught me so much. She taught me how to play the inner game. The physical part of it, we can all prepare and get ready to compete, right? And lift the weights, drink right, drink water, and take care of your body, all that stuff. But the inner game cannot not be played. And you should think about that, and your listeners to think about that as well. The inner game cannot not be played. When you see someone walking, metaphorically speaking, you see someone walking, you make an assessment about that person on some unconscious or conscious level. It may not be a deep thing. If you see an attractive woman or a man and you have an assessment about them, you don't maybe not even say anything to them, but you may smile. You may not smile at all. But perception and evaluation are inseparable. You cannot see something and not make a conscious assessment about what you just saw. It may not be deep and detailed, but you have made an assessment about what you just saw. That's how perceptions work. That's how our senses work. Once we see something, you cannot unsee it, and you cannot unassess it, is what I would say. I would go a step further. So what made me write this book was a mother that taught me things like that, the inner game, and how it cannot not be played. You cannot do life and not play the psychology of life. And to the extent that you understand what's coming, and to the extent that you can be armed with the tools that allow you to compete and win, your success and failure is relative to your preparation in that regard. And so for me, it was about honoring my mom. And I said to myself, and I remember when it happened, I said, hey, for all I had been given in life, had I leveraged what I had been afforded with the veracity that my mom did, here I was, not subject to some of the things that she did. She grew up picking cotton in East Arkansas and put herself through school and did all these marvelous things, and put herself through college, married my dad when he was 15 years of age. And it's just amazing. I think about that. In her funeral, there were 1,200 people at the funeral. And there were every people from street people to a U.S. senator, a mayoral candidate, a congressperson, and street people. And there was this wide array of people. And, you know, I get emotional when I think about it, because what it showed me was this was a woman who was no respected person. And in the strictest sense of her faith, she treated that senator the same way she treated that street person. She treated everybody the same. And that soul is where the value came in for her. And when you came in her presence, you knew it. I got the short gene, you know. My mom was 6'1", and she played basketball and volleyball, and she just had this ability about her that was different, man. When you walked into a room, or she walked into a room, she commanded the room, and you knew it. To this day, when Barry Switzer calls me up, he goes, he always finds a way to talk about my mom, because they both were from Arkansas. Really? And he says, I remember your mom, man. She was a stately looking, regal woman. And she says, he would always say, I sure wish you would have got a couple more inches from her. You know, so I was the 5'11", 205 running back. My mom was like 6'1", right? And he goes, I wish you got a couple inches from your mother. I said, okay, all right, like that, huh? So, how can they get your book, man? Man, listen, they can get it on Amazon.com. You know, wherever books are sold, Barnes and Noble. And we're going to make a concerted effort to leverage all the social media platforms in 2021, beginning with the college football season. So they'll be able to reach me. You can get me at Spencer Tillman on Twitter, obviously. We're on Instagram as well. But we're going to do some really cool things now. And this is my season. And when I say that, I'm speaking about some of the events that have taken place. You have to be mindful of what has just taken place in the world of college football. And as we wind down this interview, the NIL, name, image, and likeness, is going to transform the game of college football. And it opens up a whole new array of what parents need to be mindful of, and what student athletes, their term, not mine, need to be mindful of in this new landscape that we're in. It's an opportunity of a lifetime. And so they need mentors. They need some of the things that we've just been talking about. And I'm prepared for that. And this is our season. And so I think we go through life 3 phases. We acquire knowledge, we execute on that knowledge, and then we have to give that knowledge back. And that's the phase that we're in right now. Yeah. Yep. OU just announced along with Texas to lead the Big 12 to go to the SEC. Yep. Yeah, listen, first of all, it hadn't happened yet. They announced their intention to explore that. And I'm not going to compromise anybody's position on that whatsoever. I will tell you this, that this is a long game. It's a long play. And all of the news of it being something that's going to happen, it's going to be imminent, that ain't true. And I think, and I have confidence in saying that. I'm an analyst. I've been watching this game for a long time. And it is to Oklahoma and Texas' benefit that this stretches out a little bit. This is a long game, because you have the 3 years left on your television contract. It doesn't expire until 2025. And so when that happens, then materially they can literally go to another conference. But until that time, you don't want the lesser lights of your conference to become bitter and have 3 years of lame duck status and to get pissed off about it and then end up suing you. I mean, that's the last thing you want, because they can, because the conference owns the rights to Oklahoma and Texas, because those rights were bargained away in their last agreement with the networks that they have contracts with. The Fox Network, ESPN, and ABC/Disney, they have contracts with them. And so for them to break that to go to the SEC, there's going to be a huge payout. They're going to have to pay them back, and then they still won't have their rights for 3 years. So there's just something to be said for doing things the right way. If you notice recently, they just had a discussion where they are going to be talking with the conference, right, about what's going on. And so we'll see where that takes place.
Just before we go, one last question, man. I call this BS moment. And it comes from the Isley Brothers.
You know, they have
a song called Fight the Power.
Right.
And in the lyrics, they say all this BS is going down.
Yep.
Everybody have BS. Everybody.
Mm-hmm. What is a BS moment that gets on your nerves
that you had in the NFL or at Fox Sports or personal that you want to share with us?
Well, one of them right now is my light is flashing in and out, so your audience is seeing me go dark and brown, dark and brown, dark and brown. That's one of the BS moments right now, the technology when it goes crazy. No, but seriously, on a personal note, maybe one of the BS moments is really, for 80 years, the NCAA has gotten away with one of the most farcical and embarrassing situations in the history of mankind. I truly believe that. To be able to go for 115 years, the bulk of it, I'd say 90 of which, under the guise of amateurism, post 1984, when Oklahoma and Georgia sued for the right to negotiate their television contracts. Since that time, there has been the NCAA, and more specifically football and college programs, have been awash in cash generated on the backs of primarily minorities, or disproportionately minorities, in the revenue generating sports of basketball and football. I don't want to make this an issue of race, and people get amnesia when you start talking about it in the context of race. Well, guess what? I didn't create the construct of race. You know, we didn't. When I say we, I'm talking about human beings. Only started thinking about race in the 1400s when we brought slaves here on slave ships. You know, post that time. You know, 1619 when they came here. But before then, before that time, during the 1400, 1500, it was about the culture. It wasn't about how much melanin you have in your skin. So the construct of race was created so that people could dominate disadvantaged people, or people who were at a less than attractive position in terms of negotiating capacity. So the NCAA and all of the institutions are extensions of broader culture. There's 7 primary pillars of culture: education, business, government, arts and entertainment, of which sport is a member, family, and media. So those primary pillars, what they all have in common is they have to have leadership. And the leadership in education, particularly in college, has leveraged that education standard and hid behind the veil of education, and basically created a sophisticated form of slavery that was covered up with niceties of complexity. That's all the NCAA was, insofar as it operated in the revenue generating sports of basketball and football. And so they were able to, and again, don't beat me up. One of the most conservative Supreme Court justices just said this, essentially, when, Brett Kavanaugh ruled, and the 9-0 decision of the Supreme Court said, you don't have the right to build wealth on the back of people without remunerating them. That wasn't Spencer Tillman saying that. They ridiculed me at CBS Sports when I said that 12 years ago. And they said, well, no, you can't say this. I said, sure, they're not running around. People aren't running around as slaves with shackles and things of that nature. But materially, it is the same thing. You are building wealth on people without compensating them. They don't have access to it. And you have built in a punitive system that discourages them from trying to make money. But the person who's on an academic scholarship or an engineering scholarship, they don't get disqualified from that scholarship if they go have a summer job, or if someone from the engineering school wants to take me to lunch and I'm an engineering student, I don't get disqualified, or somehow the program gets shut down because I took $2.50 from an alumnus. That's ridiculous on its face. But to be able to have worked with that system in place and accept it, right, to me, was trifling. That's trifling, and that's, as the old folks used to say, and that's what gets me pissed off. That's one of the moments and situations that I really have a problem with.
some real shit.
Yeah.
That is some real shit.
Yeah.
Spencer Tillman, man, I always enjoy talking to you, my man. And I thank
Anytime.
you for say that with Adrian, and I appreciate you, my man. And as we wrap it up, I say this, I used to do radio. Used to do radio, getting morning show with Snowman back in the day. And he always said at the end of the show, whenever you feel yourself at the end of the rope, tie that and hold on tight.
Good.
Remember the bottom line. Ain't nobody bad like you. Spencer, thank you, my man. It's a wrap.
Thank you, brother. Be good. Love you, mean it. Take care.
Love you too, man. Thank you.